A very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today, our program bringing you all the latest news happening around the African continent. My name is Angie Meher and as usual, I'll be joining you this afternoon, and we start with a look straight away at some of the news making the headlines, beginning with the DRC, where a number of people killed in 2 attacks in the east of the DRC has risen to at least 55 people. They are thought to have been carried out by gunmen from the Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF, one of the dozen armed groups operating in the region. The area has, however, also seen violence between several ethnic groups. We have more details in this story.
Egypt on Monday condemned the remarks of Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on plans to build several dams in the country, saying Ethiopia continues to show bad faith and to disregard international law rules. Ahmed on Sunday said Ethiopia plans to construct more than 100 small and medium dams in various regional states during the next new fiscal year. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesman Ambassador Ahmed Hafiz said that Ethiopian PM Ahmed's remarks again reveals Ethiopia's bad faith and its dealing with the River Nile and other international rivers that it shares with neighboring countries, as if they are domestic rivers that falls under its sovereignty and are harnessed to severe its interests. The ministry said also that Egypt always recognized the right of all Nile Basin countries to establish water projects and to exploit the River Nile resources to achieve development. The ministry said that Ahmed's remarks are nothing but a continuation of the regrettable Ethiopian approach that brushes aside the international law rules that must be applied and regulates the utilization of international rivers. The ministry also noted that these rules oblige Ethiopia to respect the rights of other riparian countries and to not to harm their interests. Egypt and Sudan are already in an escalating dispute with Ethiopia, which has reiterated plans to implement the second filling of its massive Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, GERD, in July. Addis Ababa plans brush aside Egypt and Sudan's objections and concerns about the water rights in the event of implementing the second filling before a binding agreement is reached among the 3 countries.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies. That was actually a report about the latest Egyptian statements on the Ethiopian Prime Minister, where they slammed the Prime Minister over a plan to build over 100 dams over the country. That was that report. But now we do bring you the latest on the current situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Let's take a look.
The United Nations said on Monday that at least 55 people were killed overnight in 2 attacks in villages in eastern Congo, in potentially the worst night of violence the area has seen it at least 4 years. The army and a local civil rights group blamed the Allied Democratic Forces ADF, an armed group, for raiding the village of Tshabi and a camp for displaced people near Boga, another village. Both are close to the border of Uganda. In a statement, the UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs said that houses were burned and civilians abducted. The Geosecurity Tracker, KEST, which has mapped unrest in Restive, eastern Congo since June 2017, said on Twitter the wife of a local chief was among the dead. The ADF is believed to have killed more than 850 people in 2020, according to the United Nations, in a spate of reprisal attacks on civilians after the army began operations against it the year before. In March, the United States labeled the ADF a foreign terrorist organization. Congolese president declared a state of siege in Congo's North Kivu and Ituri provinces on May 1st in an attempt to curb increasing attacks by militant groups. Uganda announced earlier this month that it had agreed to share intelligence and coordinate operations against the rebels, but that it would not be deploying troops in Congo.
And continuing with our news, negotiations on a draft deal submitted by South Africa and India on an intellectual property waiver for COVID-19 vaccines at the World Trade Organization hasn't achieved any breakthrough amid opposition from the European Union, which is home to hundreds of drug makers. We have more details in this story.
A deal on an intellectual property waiver for COVID-19 vaccines at the World Trade Organization WTO was no closer to acceptance on Monday despite Washington's backing. Negotiations reopened at the WTO on Monday focused on a revised draft submitted by India, South Africa and dozens of other developing countries last week. Monday's discussions, the 11th session since the initial waiver proposal in October, failed to achieve a breakthrough. A surprise U.S. shift earlier this month to support the patent waiver heaped pressure on remaining opponents like the European Union and Switzerland that are home to numerous drug makers. The waiver's main backers presented their new draft in Monday's private WTO meeting, allowing key players to give their first fiscal feedback on its contents. The meeting is critical because it will determine if the talks will advance to a text-based negotiations, as told by Director General Ngozi Okonjo. A Geneva trade official said that proposals that start text-based discussions gained traction on Monday, including from the United States, which said it was open to discussion on any proposal that could boost vaccine production and delivery. And around 10 countries, including South Korea and Britain, continued to express doubts and asked for more time to study the new South Africa-India proposal. The European Union is set to present an alternative plan for boosting production and availability of COVID-19 vaccines to the WTO in early June.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by Dr. Mostafa Tamaam, the political analyst. Dr. Mostafa, a very good afternoon to you, sir. Hello, doctor, can you hear us? Right. I think we have a technical problem with the phone call, a very short break, and we will be right back after the short break, hopefully with Dr. Mostafa on the line. Do stay tuned.
نحن لدينا مصير مشترك.
مصر تسلمت الرئاسة الدورية للاتحاد الإفريقي لعام 2019 وتتطلع كعادتها دوما للتعبير عن شواغل الشعوب الإفريقية الشقيقة الرامية لتحقيق الاستقرار والتقدم ودفع عجلة التنمية قدما. إذا كنتم ترغبون في تغيير وجه القارة الأفريقية فالاتحاد الإفريقي كقيادة تستطيع أن تعمل وتدرس بشكل مركزي لمشروع عملاق لبناء بنية أساسية على مستوى القارة. أنا أتصور أن الأمن والاستقرار استثمار. إذا لم تستقر هذه القارة والأمن فيها بمعدلاته عالية، هذا الأمر سينعكس بالسلب علينا كلنا.
Welcome back. Right. Hopefully we do have Dr. Mostafa Tamaam, the political analyst, on the line. A very good afternoon to you, doctor.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Now, firstly, doctor, the draft proposed by South Africa and India, which was presented to the World Trade Organization about an intellectual property waiver for the COVID vaccinations has hit a stalemate. Now, for my first question, doctor, how does this affect the COVID-19 vaccinations situation globally, specifically for the poorer countries?
Certainly, this is a positive move because the poor countries were really, during the past period, were probably deprived from receiving all kinds of support to overcome the consequences of the COVID-19. This caused a lot that the two factors really were responsible for increasing the number of casualties. Number one, not abiding to the regulations set up by the state and by the Minister of Health. Number two, a lack of support and lack of the medicine itself. The quantity of medicine received by these countries was minimal.
Yes.
The concentration was on the European and American continent.
Yes.
So this caused that the number of casualties, these two factors that I just mentioned to you, caused that the number of casualties have increased dramatically in poor countries.
So, Dr. Mostafa, now the European Union and drug makers, obviously the European Union houses lots of drug makers, they have certain concerns. How far are their concerns viable with regards to this waiver?
Well, you see, the point is that there are certain concerns that probably the number of vaccines will not be available, you see, due to the large demand. Number two probably is, as I mentioned again, is not abiding to the regulations, you see, because a lot of countries, unfortunately, do not follow these regulations.
Right. So, Dr. Mostafa, this U.S. waiver is widely supported, as you said, by developing nations and African countries, etc., seeing hope to make the coronavirus vaccination more available for the African continent. Do you think that we here in Africa have the sufficient infrastructure to mass produce the COVID vaccinations around the continent?
I'll tell you, we cannot, you see, generalize on all countries.
Yes.
For example, let us take Egypt.
Of course,
Egypt has the
yes.
infrastructure
Yes.
and has the human resources.
And has already received the first batch to start manufacturing.
Exactly. So Egypt probably is ready in order to manufacture the vaccine itself. Other countries probably which do not have, they have the lack of technology, and lack of human resources to handle this issue, probably will find a bit of difficulties in order to manufacture the vaccine. In order, certainly, probably also the infrastructure there in certain countries will not be adequate in order to manufacture the vaccine.
So now, Dr. Mostafa, some countries, especially from the European Union, are saying that there's no need for this property waiver. This won't solve the production problem of the vaccination, and Europe can ramp up the production and distribution of the vaccination. Do you think that this is possible, especially that, as you said, lots of countries, the poorer nations, are lacking in vaccinations?
No, I don't think so, certainly, because again, the number in poor countries are increasing dramatically.
Yes.
And certainly the capacity, and certainly Europe itself, are suffering from casualties, you see, but less than the poor countries. So in order to have a surplus, certainly that will be very, very difficult, you see, because certainly the European countries have a maximum capacity of production. And the first priority will be for each European country to cover its needs. Probably, I don't think that because the number is very, very high in the African and other non-European countries is very high, so it'd be very difficult in order, on the short run I'm talking, to cover the needs of these countries.
What are your thoughts, Doctor, on the vaccination campaigns currently taking place inside Africa as a continent as a whole, and then we'll go to individual countries?
Certainly some countries, African countries, are probably making a lot of efforts in order to encourage people to take the vaccine, because certain citizens in certain countries are frightened because the drawbacks and the reaction that might cause them after taking the vaccine. Probably there'll be certain negative reactions. See? So probably there is a campaign in certain countries in order to highlight that the vaccine is safe and that everyone should take it because it will decrease number, it will preserve the lives of citizens.
Indeed. Now, Doctor, how do you see African governments putting more pressure or exerting more pressure to get a fairer share of the available vaccinations or the vaccinations currently being produced, especially because, as you said, the coronavirus, it's a worldwide, a global pandemic, so we can't be lagging behind when it comes to the vaccinations?
Certainly, as I mentioned, the priority for the producing countries would be to meet their needs first. So even the pressures probably by African countries will be minimal because certainly the countries, the European countries or the countries which are producing this vaccine will claim that they need a certain amount to cover their citizenship that are living in their countries. And then and they will probably claim that the capacity of manufacturing has reached to maximum. So it will be very different. I don't think that the pressures will succeed in probably changing the strategy of these European countries.
And how do you see the vaccination campaign currently being held inside Egypt with the whole process that we're currently witnessing and people going to get their vaccinations?
I see that a lot of improvement has been done. Probably due to the media that are probably focusing on the benefits and the facilities that are available. And probably since 2 days ago at the Ahram newspaper, we saw the Prime Minister himself with the Minister of Health that are visiting certain locations to ensure that the vaccine is available and the people are at ease and everything is going fine.
Absolutely right. Dr. Mostafa Tamaam, our political analyst, I'd like to thank you very, very much, sir, for your time and for your insight on today's edition of Africa Today. That's all the time we have for today's episode. You were in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching.